Chapter 1. The Patient. Aurelia Moonblest had 3 rules about taking patients. 1. She didn't treat anyone who wouldn't follow instructions. 2. She didn't work for free, not even for pack alphas who thought the title entitled them to charity. 3. She didn't travel more than 4 days for anyone short of dying. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday. Unsigned but on gray-mane paper, she'd recognize the watermark anywhere, the same way you'd recognize the scar from a burn you got 7 years ago. She hadn't needed to read the name to know whose territory was asking for a healer. She'd read it anyway. The king has sustained injuries during a structural collapse. 3 broken ribs, a deep wound to the left side, suspected internal complications. Our healers have stabilized him but lack expertise in wolf-specific recovery. You are the foremost specialist in the Western Territories. We humbly request. Aurelia had stopped reading at humbly. Wolves were never humble. They were desperate and calling it manners. She'd packed her kit, saddled her mare, and ridden 4 days across the mountains because Desmond Greymane was injured and she was the best healer in the region. And she did not let men she used to love die of infected ribs because they'd broken her heart. That wasn't principle, it was spite. She planned to heal him so thoroughly he'd have to live a long, healthy life knowing she'd saved it, without needing anything from him in return. Her wolf had been quiet for the entire ride. Not sleeping, Aurelia knew the difference by now. Quiet the way a cat was quiet before it decided whether the thing in front of it was prey or furniture. Fine, her wolf said, as the gates of Greymane Keep came into view. Fine, Aurelia agreed. The young man who met her at the gate was practically vibrating. Mistress Moonblest? I'm Jem Hartley. I wrote the letter. Well, I wrote the letter because Hal told me to write the letter because the king refused to send for anyone, which is… Anyway, you're here, thank you. The king is… Can I take your bag? Is he conscious? Yes? Is that a question? He's conscious. He's conscious and he's angry about it. He tried to get up this morning and one of the ribs shifted and the court physician said a word I can't repeat. And then the king said a word I also can't repeat. And then Hal said we were sending for you whether the king liked it or not. And the king doesn't like it. The king doesn't know it's you specifically. Aurelia looked at Jem. Jem looked back with the wide, earnest face of someone who was 20 years old and had done something he thought was helpful and was only now beginning to suspect it might have been catastrophic. You didn't tell him who you were sending for? Hal said not to. He told the gate guards to admit the healer without announcement, just the healer, no name. Hal is a thorough man. Is there a problem? Aurelia shouldered her bag. Take me to the patient. The king's chamber was on the 2nd floor, east wing, the wing that had partially collapsed, which explained both the injury and the particular quality of cold air threading through the corridor. Aurelia catalogued the structural damage as she walked. Cracked mortar, a load-bearing wall braced with timber, the smell of old stone dust. The east wall had finally given way. She remembered Desmond checking it every storm, years ago. The one thing he refused to delegate. He'd been right not to trust it. Jem opened the door. Aurelia walked in. The room was warm, fire built high, heavy curtains pulled. No portraits on the walls. No queen's quarters adjoining. No feminine hand anywhere in the stone and leather austerity of it. Just a man's room, functional and solitary, as if no one had ever lived here but him. Desmond Greymane was in the bed, propped against pillows, shirtless from the waist up because his left side was wrapped in linen bandages that had been competently applied and were currently seeping. He was holding a sheaf of council papers in his right hand, because of course he was. The man had 3 broken ribs and suspected internal damage, and he was reviewing agricultural reports. He looked up. 7 years had given Desmond Greymane the kind of face that happened when a man spent a long time carrying something heavy and kept getting hit while he carried it. He was broader than she remembered. harder at the jaw. A scar she didn't recognize ran from his left temple into his hairline, thin, white, old. His eyes, warm honey gold, wolf bright, hadn't changed at all, and that was somehow worse than if they had. He saw her and went completely still. Not human still, wolf still. The kind of motionless that preceded either a strike or a surrender. "Fine," her wolf said, with less conviction than the first time. Aurelia set her bag on the table by the bed. She didn't greet him. She didn't acknowledge the 7 years, the stillness, the way the air in the room had changed temperature. She was a healer. He was a patient. Everything else was furniture. "Jem, close the door. I need to examine the wound." Jem backed out so fast he hit the doorframe. Aurelia opened her bag, took out her kit, washed her hands in the basin by the window with the unhurried precision of someone who had done this 10,000 times, and whose hands did not shake, regardless of who was in the bed. "Lie flat." "Aurelia, lie flat, Your Majesty." He lay flat, the papers crumpled under him. She didn't care about the papers. She pulled back the bandage. The wound was deep, a jagged tear from a stone edge, running from below his ribs to his hip. The stitching was adequate. The inflammation around it was not. She pressed 2 fingers to the edge of the wound and felt the heat of infection beginning to take hold. "Who stitched this?" "The court physician." "The court physician used cotton thread on a wolf. Is that?" "Cotton thread dissolves too fast in wolf tissue. The wound is reopening from the inside. I'll need to restitch with sinew tonight." "Tonight." "Your ribs are also set wrong. The third one is angled inward. In a human, that's uncomfortable. In a wolf, it'll puncture something the next time you shift." Desmond looked at her. She was standing over him, hands still on his wound, her face absolutely neutral, her voice the same flat, competent tone she used with every patient. Professional, thorough, completely without warmth. "How long?" he said. "How long what? How long will you need to be here?" 5 days minimum, possibly 7, depending on how well you follow instructions. She peeled off another layer of bandage. "Based on the council papers in your bed, I'm going to estimate 7. I can follow instructions." "You're the Alpha King. You've never followed an instruction in your life." Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, not quite a wince. Both. The face of a man who'd just been read accurately by someone who knew him too well, and whose left side was on fire, and who couldn't decide which of those things hurt more. Aurelia replaced the bandage with a temporary dressing from her kit. "I'll restitch tonight after the poultice has had 6 hours to draw the infection. Until then, lie flat, don't shift, don't move, don't review agricultural reports." She picked up the papers from the bed and set them on the far table, out of reach. "Those are 6 hours, Your Majesty." She turned to leave. "Aurelia." She stopped at the door, didn't turn. "Thank you for coming." "You're a patient. I'm a healer. Don't make it more than it is." She walked out. In the corridor, she pressed her back against the wall and breathed. Once. Twice. Her hands were steady, because her hands were always steady. And her wolf was awake and watching her with an expression Aurelia refused to examine. "His scent hasn't changed," her wolf observed. "Pine smoke and old stone, and something warm underneath. You had your hands on him for 4 minutes. Your pulse stayed at 62 the entire time. Very impressive. Very professional." "Shut up." "Fine." She stood against the wall and felt the thing she'd spent 7 years not naming. The pull. The low, constant ache in her sternum that she'd first felt at 24, in a courtyard, and that had never, not once, not for a single day in 7 years, gone away. She'd been told it was a mistake. She'd believed it, or tried to. But the ache didn't care what she believed. It sat in her chest like a second heartbeat, and she'd learned to work around it the way you learn to work around a bad knee. Compensate, Don't favor it. Don't let it slow you down. And above all, don't name it. Because naming it meant it was real. And if it was real, then he had lied. And if he had lied, then the 7 years were something she couldn't afford to think about. She pushed off the wall. Hal was waiting at the end of the corridor with 2 cups of tea, and the particular expression of a man who had engineered something and was at peace with it. How is he? Infection starting. Ribs set wrong. Cotton stitches in a wolf. Your court physician is an idiot. The court physician is competent with humans. Wolves are not his area. Wolves are my area. I know. Hal handed her a cup. That's why I sent for you. Aurelia took the tea, drank, looked at him over the rim. You could have warned me. If I'd warned you, you wouldn't have come. I would have come. I would have charged more. Hal almost smiled. Almost. Guest quarters are on the 3rd floor. I've set up a workspace in the adjacent chamber for your medicines. Anything you need, herbs, equipment, supplies, Jem will get it. I need sinew thread, comfrey root, willow bark tincture, and a patient who doesn't think he's invincible. I can provide 3 of those 4. Aurelia finished the tea. The wound isn't the real problem, Hal. The rib is. If it's not reset before it starts healing in the wrong position, he'll never shift safely again. That's a procedure that takes precision, time, and a patient who lies still for 12 hours afterward. Can he do that? Can you make him? Aurelia looked at Hal. Hal looked back. I've been making wolves lie still for a decade, Hal. Kings aren't special. No, Hal said, watching her walk away with the quiet certainty of a man who had been right about something for 7 years. They're not. Inside, in the king's chamber, Desmond Greymane was staring at the ceiling. She touched us, Brack said. She examined a wound. Her hands were on our skin. Her hands. On our skin. For 4 minutes. I counted. I counted every second. There were 240 of them, and each one was, she's a healer. She was checking for infection. She smells like thyme and willow bark and clean linen and something underneath that. Brack. We are going to lie here for 5 to 7 days while she touches us repeatedly, and you are going to pretend this is medical, and I am going to lose what remains of my mind. It is medical. She called us Your Majesty. She has never called us Your Majesty. She used to call us Desmond. She used to call us Des when she thought no one was listening. She called us Your Majesty, and it was the worst thing anyone has ever said to us. And we have been stabbed, Desmond. We have recently been stabbed by a wall. Desmond closed his eyes. Brack, quieter, the surge dropping to something raw. She came. She knew it was us, and she came anyway. Why did she come? Because she's a healer. She came because she's Aurelia, and we don't deserve it. And she knows that, and she came anyway. Desmond didn't answer. After a while, his breathing evened out. Not sleep, but the specific stillness of a man who was choosing not to think about the thing that was going to think about him, whether he chose it or not. Chapter 2. The Stitching. Aurelia restitched the wound at sundown. She'd spent the afternoon preparing, grinding comfrey into a poultice, preparing the sinew thread, heating her instruments over a clean flame. The work steadied her the way it always did. Medicine was honest. Bodies were honest. You pressed here, and the body told you what was wrong. No politics, no history, no 7 years of damage dressed up as protection. Just tissue and bone, and the specific, knowable mechanics of something broken being put back together. Jem hovered at the workroom door. Can I watch? If you can be quiet. I can be quiet. He lasted 45 seconds. Does it hurt, the restitching, when you pull the old thread out? Does it? The king seems like someone who doesn't, but does it? Jem. Right, quiet. It hurts. Wolf tissue heals around the thread. Pulling it is like pulling a root from soil. I'll use a numbing tincture, but he'll feel it. And he has to be awake for it? He has to be awake for it. That seems adversarial. Aurelia looked at Jem. Medicine isn't personal. Jem nodded. Then, with the specific unwisdom of a 20-year-old, "But it is, though. A little, right? Since you and the king." Jem. Hal said I shouldn't ask. Hal is correct. But everyone in the keep knows. They've known since you walked through the gate. The guard said his wolf. I mean, everyone could feel it. When you walked in, the whole pack felt something shift. Like a window opening in a room that's been shut for. Jem. Aurelia put down the mortar. I am going to restitch the king's wound. It will take approximately 90 minutes. During that time, I need steady hands, clear focus, and an assistant who does not narrate the emotional subtext of the procedure. Can you do that? Yes. Then carry the tray. The king's chamber was warm and low-lit. Aurelia had ordered the fire built up and the lamps dimmed. Wolf eyes dilated with pain, and bright light made it worse. Desmond was propped against the headboard, shirtless, watching her set up with the focused attention of a man who was preparing to be hurt and had decided to approach it with dignity. Aurelia laid out her instruments on the bedside table. Sinew thread, curved needle, numbing tincture, clean linen. A tincture of valerian for after, to help him sleep. She arranged everything with the practiced efficiency of someone who could do this blindfolded and had, once, during a siege. I'm going to apply the numbing tincture first. It takes 5 minutes to set. Then I'll remove the cotton stitches and restitch with sinew. I need you to stay still throughout. Can you do that? Yes. If the pain gets beyond what you can manage, tell me. I'll pause. There's no prize for suffering silently. I'm aware. Aurelia uncorked the tincture and poured it onto a clean cloth. She sat on the edge of the bed, close, clinical, necessary, and pressed the cloth to the wound. He hissed. One sharp intake through his teeth. Then nothing. She held the cloth steady. Her fingers were on his bare skin, against the ridge of muscle along his side, and the warmth of him was radiating into her palm like a furnace. Wolves ran hot. She knew that. She'd treated hundreds of wolves. She knew exactly what wolf skin felt like under her hands. She knew exactly what his skin felt like under her hands, which was a different kind of knowing entirely, and she was going to put it in a box and lock the box and bury the box in the back garden of her professional competence. His heartbeat is elevated, her wolf noted. He's in pain. That's normal. His heartbeat is elevated and it's not from pain. I said, shut up. What? Desmond said. Not you. Aurelia adjusted the cloth. The tincture. I was talking to the tincture. Desmond looked at her with an expression that said he knew exactly who she'd been talking to. Don't, she said. He didn't. She waited the 5 minutes, then she began. Removing the cotton stitches was the worst part. Each one had begun to bond with the healing tissue, and pulling them was, as she'd told Jem, like pulling roots from soil. She worked carefully, precisely, each extraction followed by a press of clean linen to catch the blood. Desmond didn't make a sound. His hands were fists in the sheets. The tendons in his neck were standing out like cables. His jaw was set so hard she could hear his teeth. You can make noise, she said, without looking up. I've heard worse. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're performing fine. Breathe out when I pull. It helps. He breathed out. She pulled. He grunted, short, involuntary, the sound a body makes when it's done pretending. Better, she said. The new stitches went in faster. Sinew thread, curved needle, the rhythm she'd learned from the old healer in the Northern Territories, who'd taught her that wolf medicine was about patience and precision and never, ever rushing. That the wolf body would fight you if you went too fast and work with you if you matched its pace. She stitched. He breathed. The fire cracked and settled. Jem stood in the corner holding the tray with the solemnity of someone witnessing a sacrament. Halfway through, Aurelia's hand brushed the scar she didn't recognize. The one on his left side, below the new wound, older, long-healed but ragged. She'd mapped his body 7 years ago. This scar wasn't on the map. This is from the succession, she said, not a question. First winter. She traced it without thinking. Healer's reflex, reading old damage through fingertips. The scar was deep. The healing had been rushed. Whoever had treated it had done competent work under bad conditions. "There's another one," Desmond said quietly. "Under the right shoulder blade. And one on the left thigh. And—" "How many?" "7. 7 scars from 7 years. One for each year she hadn't been there." Aurelia pulled another stitch through sinew and didn't trust her voice for a moment. "The one on his ribs," her wolf said. "That one nearly killed him. Feel the depth. Feel how close it went." Aurelia felt it. The depth. The closeness. The specific, technical nearness of a wound that had nearly ended the man lying under her hands. She finished the stitching, cleaned the wound, applied the poultice, wrapped clean bandages. Every step precise, professional, and performed with hands that did not shake because shaking was not something Aurelia Moonblest's hands did, regardless of what the rest of her was doing. "Done," she sat back. "Don't move for 12 hours. I mean it. Not to shift, not to stand, not to reach for your council papers. 12 hours. Aurelia. Drink this." She held out the valerian tincture. "It'll help you sleep." He took the cup. Their fingers touched, brief, functional, the kind of contact that happened between healers and patients 100 times a day and meant nothing. Brack went silent for 6 full seconds. Aurelia counted. Desmond drank the tincture, made a face. "That's terrible, yes. Drink all of it." He drank all of it, set the cup down, looked at her with wolf gold eyes in the firelight, the numbing tincture starting to soften the pain, the valerian beginning its slow pull toward sleep. "You have good hands," he said, half awake. The managed mode dropping away as the medicine took hold. The real voice underneath, the one that didn't calculate before it spoke. Aurelia took the cup. "Go to sleep, Your Majesty." "Desmond. Go to sleep." She collected her instruments, nodded to Jem, who was still holding the tray and had forgotten to blink. They left. The door closed. In the corridor, Jem exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 90 minutes. That was routine. That was not routine. That was the way you and he just... And the scars. Jem, it was routine. Go to bed. Jem went. Aurelia stood in the corridor and pressed her palms flat against the cold stone wall and breathed until the heat in her hands, his heat, wolf furnace heat, 7 years of missing it crystallized into 90 minutes of pretending it was clinical, faded to something she could carry. Her wolf, very quiet. His body remembers yours. Bodies don't remember. His does. His pulse changed when you touched the scar. Not the wound, the old scar, the one from the first winter. His body knows your hands. Aurelia pushed off the wall and walked to her quarters. She didn't sleep. She lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling, and her hands remembered the topography of a body that had changed. 7 new scars, harder muscle, the specific warmth of him, the way his breathing had settled under her touch, the way a horse's breathing settled when you put your hand on its neck and told it, "You're all right, I'm here." And her wolf watched her not sleeping with the patient, devastating attention of an animal who had decided to stop pretending. 7 years without a pack. That was the other thing. The thing underneath the thing. Not just the bond, the absence of belonging. A wolf without a pack carried a specific kind of silence inside them. Not loneliness, exactly, but a frequency missing. Like hearing a song through a wall and knowing every note, but never being in the room where it was playing. Aurelia had built her life around that silence, had treated it like a scar, part of her topography now, healed over, structural. But walking through Greymane Keep, feeling the pack bonds hum in every corridor, smelling the layered scent of a dozen wolves who knew each other and were known, it was like putting weight on a leg she'd forgotten was broken. Her wolf had been hiding behind Fine for 7 years. Maybe not just because of Desmond. Maybe because feeling the pack-shaped absence clearly would have been worse than feeling nothing at all. Chapter 3. The Storm. The storm arrived on the third day. Aurelia had spent the intervening time in a state of aggressive professionalism. She checked the wound twice daily, morning and evening, hands on his skin, eyes on the stitches, voice level and informative, and absolutely devoid of anything that could be mistaken for tenderness. She changed his bandages. She adjusted his pain management. She bullied him into drinking terrible tinctures with the calm authority of someone who had decided that the fastest way through this was straight through, and that sentiment was a detour she couldn't afford. Desmond, for his part, was a terrible patient in exactly the way she'd predicted. She found the council papers back on his bed by the second morning. She removed them. They reappeared by noon. She removed them again and put them in the corridor. He sent Jem to retrieve them. She intercepted Jem. "Those papers stay outside this room." But the king said, "The king has 3 broken ribs and a wound that will reopen if he reaches above his shoulder. The papers require reaching above his shoulder. The papers stay outside." He's going to be upset. He's going to be alive. He can be upset about it from a position of continued existence. Jem's face did something complicated, halfway between admiration and terror, and he retreated without the papers. 20 minutes later, Hal appeared at Aurelia's workroom door. "He's asking for you." "Is he dying?" "He's requesting his papers." "Then he's not dying. Tell him I'll check his wound at the scheduled time and not before." Hal leaned against the doorframe. "You know, 7 years ago, you were the only person in this keep who could make him do anything. Eat, sleep, stop working past midnight. You'd just walk into his study and say, 'Enough,' and he'd put the pen down. That was 7 years ago. He still puts the pen down. He just doesn't have anyone to say, 'Enough.'" Aurelia ground her herbs. The mortar scraped against the pestle. She didn't look up. "I'm his healer, Hal, not his keeper." "No," Hal said, "but you're the only person he's ever been afraid of. And right now you're telling him to lie still, and he's lying still. That's not nothing." He left. Aurelia ground the herbs until they were powder, and then kept grinding. She was checking his wound that evening, day 3, the stitches holding well, the infection retreating, when she found the second set of scars. She'd asked him to turn onto his right side so she could examine the wound track around to his back. He turned, slowly, with the controlled breathing of a man managing significant pain without admitting it. And there, across his shoulder blade, running down his spine in 3 parallel lines, claw marks. Old, deep, the kind that came from another wolf. Aurelia's hands stopped. "Succession," Desmond said. He was facing away from her. He couldn't see her face. "The Ashton faction sent a challenger. November of the first year. I was 23. Aurelia touched the scars. Healer's touch, mapping depth, checking healing quality. But her fingers lingered a half-second longer than diagnosis required, tracing the lowest of the 3 lines to where it disappeared beneath the bandage. "You fought a challenger at 23. I fought several. And you won. I'm here. You're here with claw scars and broken ribs and a wound that was stitched with the wrong thread by a physician who doesn't understand wolf physiology." Aurelia's voice was even, professionally even. The kind of even that was itself a statement. "You've been getting hurt in increasingly creative ways for 7 years, and no one in this keep has thought to hire a healer who knows what they're doing. I have a court physician. You have a court physician who stitches wolves with cotton. I've seen better wound care from village herbalists. I've seen better wound care from myself at 19 in a field." Desmond turned his head slightly. She could see the edge of his mouth. "Are you angry about my medical care?" "I am professionally appalled by your medical care." "You look angry." "I look focused. Lie still." She finished the examination, rewrapped the bandage. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. But something under the steadiness was running hot, and it wasn't professional appall. It was the scars. 7 years of scars she hadn't been there to treat, inflicted during a succession she hadn't been there to witness, on a body she used to know as well as her own hands. He'd been getting hurt. For 7 years. And she hadn't known because he'd sent her away before the hurting started. He sent us away so we wouldn't see this, her wolf said. Aurelia packed her kit. I need to check your ribs tomorrow. The third one needs resetting before it heals in place. That procedure will be painful, and you'll need to be completely still for 12 hours afterward. I can be still. We'll see. She was at the door when he said, the claw marks, the challenger. That was the same month I. Don't. Aurelia. I know what month it was. Her voice was quiet now, not professional quiet, the other kind. I know exactly what month it was. I know it was November. I know it was 3 weeks after you told me the bond was a mistake and sent me away. I know because I was in a village in the Northern Territories, sleeping in a stranger's barn, trying to figure out how to be a person without a mate bond, and you were here fighting challengers and getting clawed open and you didn't tell me. You didn't even, she stopped, breathed. You didn't tell me, she said, and walked out. The storm hit at midnight. Aurelia had been in her workroom, preparing the rib resetting instruments, when the wind changed. It came from the east, the damaged side, and within minutes the whole wing was groaning. She felt the structure shift before she heard it. A deep, grinding vibration through the floor, the sound of stone under pressure. She ran. The east corridor was already dangerous, a crack running up the wall, plaster falling, the timber braces bowing under the load. 2 of the household guard were evacuating the lower rooms. Jem was there, wide-eyed, carrying blankets. The king, Jem started. I know. She pushed through to the king's chamber. The door was jammed, the frame had shifted. She shouldered it open and found Desmond half out of bed, one hand braced on the headboard, his face gray with pain. What are you doing? The wall. I can hear the wall. Get back in bed. The east section is going to get back in bed. He got back in bed. Not because she was right, the wall was going to go, and they both knew it, but because his body made the decision for him. The rib shifted when he moved, and he went white, and his knees buckled, and Aurelia caught him, which meant her arms were around him, which meant her face was against his shoulder, which meant for 3 seconds they were holding each other, and it wasn't medical. She got him back against the pillows. Her hands were on his chest, checking the rib, checking the bandage, checking his breathing, and his heart was slamming under her palm so hard she could feel it in her own wrist. Your heart rate is elevated. The building is falling down. Your heart rate was elevated before the building started falling down. He looked at her. She looked at him. The lamp swung in the draft from the cracking wall. Outside, the storm was tearing the night apart. We need to move you, Aurelia said. This wing isn't safe. I can't walk. I know. Jem! Jem! Jem appeared in the doorway. Help me move him. We need to get to the central hall. The old stone, the original structure, that'll hold. They moved him. It was not graceful. It involved Desmond's arm over Jem's shoulder, Aurelia bracing his wounded side, and a slow, agonizing shuffle down the corridor while the wall behind them made sounds that walls should not make. Desmond's jaw was locked. His breathing was shallow. Jem was holding the king upright with the grim determination of a man who weighed 60 pounds less than his cargo and was not going to let physics win. Left, Aurelia said. Through the archway. I know the layout of my own castle, Desmond said through his teeth. You're facing the wrong direction. Left. Jem adjusted his grip. Desmond's shoulder slipped. Jem caught it, overcorrected, and kneed the king in the healing rib. Desmond made a sound. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. Walk, Jem. He need us, Brack said, with the outraged dignity of a wolf who was being carried out of his own castle by a boy who couldn't grow a full beard. The child need us. We are an alpha king. We have killed challengers. We have held this territory for 7 years. We are being fireman carried by a 20-year-old. It's not a fireman carry, Desmond muttered. It is adjacent to a fireman carry, and I would like my objection noted. Don't shift, Aurelia said, her mouth close to his ear because the storm was deafening. Desmond, listen to me. Don't shift. The rib is angled inward. If you shift, it'll puncture your lung. Do you hear me? I hear you. Stay human. Stay with me. Stay, Brack said, and the outrage drained out of him like water. Stay human. She's here. She's keeping us alive. Stay. They made it to the great hall. Aurelia set Desmond against the wall, the old stone, thick and solid, built by wolves who understood that some things needed to last. She propped pillows behind him. She checked his wound. The stitches had held. The rib hadn't shifted further. He was in pain, but he was alive, and the east wing was coming down behind them in a groan of timber and stone that sounded like a living thing giving up. The hall filled gradually. Pack members, household staff, children in nightclothes. Hal appeared, calm and competent, directing people to the interior rooms. Clara, the red-haired girl with the gap-toothed smile, was clutching a stuffed wolf toy and looking more curious than scared. Is the king okay? She asked Aurelia, who was kneeling beside Desmond, checking his pulse. The king is being very brave and very stupid. Those are not mutually exclusive. Clara considered this. Poppy says he smells like you now. Aurelia's hand faltered on Desmond's wrist. 1 beat, she recovered. That's because I've been treating his wound. Healers leave scent traces. Poppy says it's not that kind of smell. Poppy should go to sleep. Poppy's never wrong. Clara was led away by her mother. Aurelia didn't look at Desmond. She didn't need to. She could feel him looking at her, feel the weight of his attention like a hand on the back of her neck, the specific quality of being watched by someone who knew you and was trying very hard not to need you. The storm raged. The east wing settled into its collapse with intermittent groans. Aurelia stayed beside Desmond on the great hall floor, her back against the old stone wall, her medical kit open beside her, monitoring his breathing every 15 minutes because the rib was a genuine risk, and she was a healer, and this was her job, and that was all this was. At 2 a.m, the hall was mostly quiet. Sleeping pack members, the occasional whimper from a child, the steady sound of rain on stone. Aurelia was awake. Desmond was awake. They were the only 2 people in the room not sleeping, sitting side by side against the wall with their shoulders almost touching. You should sleep, she said. You're not sleeping. I'm monitoring a patient. You're sitting against a wall. I'm monitoring a patient who is sitting against a wall. A pause. Then, very quietly, you saved my life tonight. I kept you from shifting. That's medicine, not heroism. You caught me when I fell. That's reflexes. Your reflexes involved putting your arms around me. My reflexes involve keeping patients upright. Don't read into it. But his shoulder was against hers now. Not almost, actually. The warmth of him bleeding through her sleeve, and she didn't move away, and he didn't move away, and the fire across the hall was burning low, and something between them was burning the opposite of low. Aurelia. His voice was the real one. The one underneath the king. Low, unmanaged, the one that came out when he was hurt or honest or too tired to hold the performance up. I missed you. Don't. I know. I'm your healer. I know. This is professional. I know that too. She turned her head and his face was right there, 6 inches, less, his eyes gold in the firelight, his wolf so close to the surface she could almost see Brack looking out at her through Desmond's eyes with an expression of such naked, bewildered devotion that her chest cracked. Not fine, her wolf said. Not fine. Not fine. I'm done pretending this is fine. Aurelia breathed in. His scent, pine smoke and old stone and warmth and blood and the specific medicinal tang of her own herbs on his skin filled her lungs. She breathed out. Go to sleep, Desmond, she whispered. I'll be here when you wake up. He closed his eyes. His shoulder stayed against hers. After a while, his breathing evened out, and Aurelia sat in the dark great hall with a collapsed wing behind her and a sleeping king beside her and her wolf wide awake and the word fine in her mouth, tasting like a lie she didn't have the energy to tell anymore. Chapter 4. The Truth. Hal came to her on the morning of the 5th day. The east wing was rubble. The keep was functioning from the central and western sections. Desmond's wound was healing. The sinew stitches doing their job, the infection gone, the color back in his face. He was still bedbound because Aurelia had reset the rib the previous day, a procedure that had involved him gripping the bed frame hard enough to crack it and her saying "breathe" 14 times in a voice that didn't waver. And she'd ordered 12 hours of absolute stillness. He was, miraculously, obeying. Aurelia was in her workroom grinding willow bark when Hal appeared, with 2 cups of tea and the face of a man who had been carrying something heavy for 7 years and had decided today was the day he put it down. I need to tell you something. If it's about his wound, it's about why he sent you away. Aurelia's hands stilled on the mortar. The pestle sat in the bowl. She didn't pick it up. I know why he sent me away. He told me. The bond was a mistake. He'd been wrong about it. He lied. I know he lied, Hal. I've known he lied since I walked into this keep and felt the bond pull so hard I nearly dropped my bag. The bond was never false. He just told me it was. Do you know why? Aurelia picked up the pestle, ground. The willow bark splintered under pressure. Tell me. Hal sat. You were together for 6 weeks. August through mid-October, the year of the succession. Desmond was 23. His father had been dead for 4 months. The Ashton faction had already killed 3 people close to the crown: Marcus, Petra Vance, his cousin Will. He was fighting challengers. The claw marks you found? Those were from November, 3 weeks after he sent you away. I know the timeline, Hal. You know your side of it. Here's his. Hal set his tea down. By October, the Ashtons knew about you. Not rumors, intelligence. They knew your name. They knew you were sleeping in the East Wing. They knew you were unbonded, that the mark hadn't been placed yet. Desmond's spy master intercepted a letter laying out a plan to take you. Aurelia's hand stopped grinding. Take me. The way they took his mother. The workroom went very still. I don't know what happened to his mother, Aurelia said. He never told me. No one in the keep ever spoke about her. I assumed she died in childbirth or illness. There were no portraits, no portraits because he took them down after the funeral. He was 8 years old and he walked through the keep and took down every painting of her himself because looking at them made his father scream. Aurelia set down the pestle. His mother, Queen Isla, was taken by a rival faction during King Roderick's succession. Different faction, same tactics. Desmond's father was 26. He'd been king for 2 years. The faction wanted leverage, and a mated king has the most specific vulnerability there is. Hal's voice was steady. His hands around his tea were not. The mate bond transmits, Aurelia. You know this. You're a healer. You understand the physiology. Pain, fear, distress. When they took Isla, when they hurt her, Roderick felt every moment of it through the bond. It didn't matter that he was the strongest alpha in the territory. They brought him to his knees without laying a hand on him. He couldn't lead, couldn't fight, couldn't think. The bond carried everything straight into his chest. How long? 3 days. They held her for 3 days. She died on the 3rd night. The bond severed, and it nearly killed him too. The shock of it, the absence where she'd been. He survived, but he was never a person again. He ruled for another 15 years. Desmond grew up in a house with a man who held a crown and checked the walls, and ate his meals, and spoke when spoken to, and none of it was living. It was maintenance. The bond had hollowed him out, and what was left was just the shape of a king with nothing inside. The mortar cracked. Aurelia didn't notice. Roderick died when Desmond was 23. Natural causes, technically. 15 years of a severed bond is what it actually was. And the Ashton faction, the inheritors of the group that took Isla, resurfaced within a month. Same territory, same methods, same playbook. And Desmond had a mate. Desmond had a mate he hadn't marked yet, sleeping in the East Wing, with a plan on the spymaster's desk describing exactly how to take her. Aurelia looked at the cracked mortar, at the willow bark dust settling on everything, at her hands, which had not been steady for the last 30 seconds, which was remarkable because Aurelia Moonblest's hands were always steady. He should have told me. Yes. He should have shown me the letter, told me about his mother, told me the risk, and let me decide. Yes. Instead, he lied about the bond and sent me away. Because he was 23, and he'd watched his father crumble for 15 years, and the letter on the spymaster's desk had your name on it, and he physically could not make himself sit across from you and say, "This is what they did to my mother, and this is what they're planning to do to you," and then wait for your answer. The possibility of you saying, "I'll stay," was worse than the certainty of you leaving. Because if you stayed and they took you, he'd feel it through the bond, every moment. And he knew, not thought, knew, it would destroy him the same way it destroyed his father. So he chose for me. He chose for you. Aurelia breathed. In, out, the way she coached patience through pain. Hal. The succession ended. The Ashtons were defeated. Within a year, the kingdom was stable. He could have sent for me. He could have written one letter, one, explaining what had happened, and letting me decide whether to come back. I know. He didn't. For 6 years, he didn't. I spent 6 years. Not the first year. I'll give him the first year. He was fighting for his life. But 6 years believing the bond was a lie. 6 years rebuilding myself around a wound he could have healed with a single, honest conversation. That's not protection, Hal. That's not fear. That's a choice he made every single day for 6 years. I know. Hal's voice was very quiet. He told himself you were better off. By the time the danger was past, you'd built your practice. You were thriving. And he thought he'd done too much damage to undo, that the lie was too big to come back from. He didn't ask, again. He decided I was better off without asking me, again. Yes. Aurelia stood, wiped the willow bark dust from her hands, looked at Hal. Where is he? In bed, where you told him to be. Desmond was lying flat, as ordered. He turned his head when she came in and knew immediately, from the way she walked, from the set of her jaw, from the particular quality of fury that Aurelia Moonblest wore like armor, that Hal had told her. Some of it, at least. Aurelia. Hal told me about the Ashton threat, the intercepted letter. He told me they had a plan to take me. Desmond closed his eyes, opened them. Yes. He told me someone else was taken before me, someone close to the crown, a mate. He said the bond was used as a weapon. Yes. He said it was your mother. Desmond was very still. Not wolf still, something deeper. The stillness of a man who had carried something for 22 years and was about to set it down in front of the only person he'd ever tried to hide it from. I was 8, he said. His voice was stripped, no king in it, no managed mode. Just the sound of a man going back to a room he'd locked. My father was 26. They took her from the garden. She was planting something. Roses, I think. I don't remember. I remember the sound he made when the bond hit. He was in the council chamber, 3 floors up, and he dropped to his knees, and he made a sound I'd never heard a person make. like something being pulled out of him by the root. Aurelia didn't sit. She stood at the foot of his bed and she listened. They held her for 3 days. Every hour, my father got worse. He couldn't eat, couldn't stand. He'd grip the arms of the chair and his eyes would go gold, and he'd make that sound again. And everyone in the room would look away because it was private. It was the most private thing I've ever seen. His body was broadcasting everything she felt, and he couldn't shut it off. Desmond. She died on the 3rd night. He felt that too, the severance. He screamed for, I don't know how long, hours. Then he stopped, and whatever had been inside him was gone. He lived for 15 more years, but he was just maintenance, a body that held a crown. He checked the walls, he ate his meals. He never said her name again. The room was very quiet. I took her portraits down, Desmond said. The morning after the funeral. I was 8, and I walked through the keep and I took them all down, because looking at them made him scream. I thought if I hid them, the screaming would stop. Did it? It stopped. Everything stopped. Aurelia breathed. When the Ashtons resurfaced, Desmond said, and the spy master put that letter on my desk with your name on it, with a plan for how to take you from the East Wing, how to hold you, how to use the bond to break me the way they'd broken my father. I read it and I was 8 years old again, standing in the corridor while my father screamed. And I thought, not her. Not like this. I will do anything. I will break anything. I will burn this whole castle down before I let them do to Aurelia what they did to my mother. So you burned us instead. The words landed between them, true and precise and devastating. You didn't tell me any of this, Aurelia said. Not the letter, not the plan, not your mother. You looked at me and you said the bond was a mistake, and you watched me believe you, and you let me walk out of here thinking I was broken. I know. And then the Ashtons were defeated, within a year, and you didn't come for me. No. For 6 years, Desmond, I slept in strangers' barns. I built my practice from nothing. I learned to be a person without a pack, without a bond, without the man I loved. And every single day I carried an ache in my chest that I couldn't name because you told me it wasn't real. 1 letter, 1 sentence. The bond was real and I lied to save your life. That's 12 words. In 6 years, you couldn't find 12 words. I thought, you thought I was better off. I know. Hal told me. You decided, again, without asking, that Aurelia Moonblessed was doing fine and didn't need the truth. You watched me from a distance and decided I was better off not knowing. The same choice, the same arrogance, for 6 years. Desmond looked at her. His face had gone past composure into something else entirely. Not pain, not guilt, not the managed suffering of a king. Just rawness. The face of a man who had just heard his own damage described to him by the person he'd damaged most. You're right, he said. About all of it. The rejection, I can explain. The letter, the threat, my mother. I had reasons. But the 6 years after, the silence, the not coming for you, the deciding you were better off, that was cowardice. That was me choosing comfort over honesty because I couldn't face what I'd done. He stopped, breathed. When he spoke again, the king was gone entirely. I'm sorry. Not performed, not managed. 2 words that cost him something visible. Not for sending you away. I'd do that again tomorrow if your name was on that letter. But for the lie. For telling you the bond wasn't real when I knew it was. For the 2 years you spent thinking your wolf was broken. I did that to you. That was me. And I'm sorry for it. Every day for 6 years I've been sorry for it. And I didn't have the courage to say it to the person who needed to hear it. Aurelia looked at him for a long time. "I understand why you sent me away," she said. Quietly, not softly. There was nothing soft about it. It was the voice she used when she was telling a patient something true that they didn't want to hear. "Your mother. The bond. The letter with my name on it. If I'd been 23 and I'd watched what you watched, I don't know what I would have done. I can't promise I would have been braver." Something in his face shifted. Relief, just a flicker, before she killed it. "But you didn't tell me. Not then, and not in the 6 years after. You let me think I was defective. You let me rebuild on a lie. And I can understand the why and still be furious about the how. Those aren't contradictory, Desmond. They're both true." "I know. I'll finish your treatment. The rib needs 2 more days. But I need you to hear me. Understanding is not forgiveness. I know what happened to your mother, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the 8-year-old boy who took down the portraits. But I am still the woman who spent 6 years believing her wolf was broken because you chose silence over trust." She walked out. Her boots on the stone floor were the only sound in the room. Desmond lay in the bed she'd ordered him not to leave and stared at the ceiling, and Brack, very quietly, very carefully, said, "She didn't say she was leaving. She didn't say she was staying either. She said 2 more days. That's not leaving. That's a timeline. Leaving doesn't have a timeline. Leaving has a saddlebag and a door. That's treatment, Brack. She's finishing the rib." She cracked the mortar. When Hal was talking, she cracked the mortar with her bare hands. That's not the behavior of someone who is indifferent. She was angry. She was feeling things. Feeling things is not indifferent. Indifferent is how she looked at us on day 1. That was indifferent. This was a cracked mortar. A cracked mortar is practically a love letter. We can work with a cracked mortar. You're delusional. I am optimistic. There is a difference. She also said she was sorry for the 8-year-old boy who took down the portraits. Nobody says that to someone they're planning to leave. That is a detail she will carry. That is a detail that matters. Brack. 2 more days. We have 2 more days. What we do with them matters. Desmond closed his eyes. Despite everything, the confrontation, the fury in her voice, the 12 words she'd counted and the 6 years she'd named, Brack was not wrong. She hadn't packed. She hadn't left. She'd said 2 more days and walked out, and her boots on the stone had not sounded like goodbye. They'd sounded like a woman deciding. Chapter 5. The Door. He started with the sinew thread. Aurelia had mentioned, once, in passing, while restitching his wound at 2 in the morning, that proper wolf-grade sinew thread was nearly impossible to source south of the Northern Territories. The next morning, without telling her, he sent a rider north with a purchase order for a 6-month supply. He didn't tell her because telling her would have been a gesture, and gestures were what he was good at: decrees, grand actions, decisions made on behalf of other people. Gestures were the vocabulary of a king who'd spent 7 years being decisive instead of being honest. She needed something smaller. Something she could discover on her own terms and interpret without his framing. The thread arrived 3 days later. Aurelia found it on her workroom table, wrapped in oiled paper, with a note in Jem's handwriting. Northern supplier, wolf grade. 6-month supply as requested. She hadn't requested it. She'd mentioned it. Once, at 2 in the morning. She stood at the workroom table holding the sinew thread, and her wolf said nothing, which was the loudest thing her wolf had said all week. Desmond followed every instruction. He lay flat when she told him to lie flat. He drank the tinctures, the terrible ones, the ones that tasted like something had died in a ditch and been steeped in vinegar. Without complaint, without commentary, without the small grimace of protest that had marked the first 2 days. He drank them the way a man does a thing when doing it matters more than the discomfort. He did not reach for his council papers. This was the one that got to her, though she'd never have admitted it. The papers had been their running battle. She confiscated them, He retrieved them. She intercepted Jem. The papers reappeared through increasingly creative channels. It was the one arena where Desmond Greymane, Alpha King, had consistently defied Aurelia Moonblessed, healer who was right. On the 6th day, the papers were on his desk. Not in his bed, not hidden under his pillow, not smuggled in by Jem. On his desk, across the room, where she told him they should be. Untouched since morning. Jem arrived at the workroom at noon with a small clay pot and the expression of a man presenting his thesis. I made a tincture. Aurelia looked up from her grinding. You what? A tincture, for the king's pain. I followed your recipe, the one you used on day 2. I measured everything. He set the pot on the table. I think the color is right. Aurelia looked at the pot. The liquid inside was a shade of green that did not exist in nature. Jem, what did you use for the willow bark base? Willow bark, like you said. Which willow? The one by the east wall, the big one. The one by the east wall is an elder tree. Jem's face underwent a rapid journey through confidence, doubt, horror, and acceptance. That's not willow. That is not willow. That is elder. Elder bark in that concentration is a laxative strong enough to incapacitate a horse. So the king should never drink this. No one should drink this. This should be buried in a deep hole, and the hole should be filled with rocks. She pushed the pot back toward him. But your measurement technique was solid. We'll work on plant identification tomorrow. Jem took the pot with both hands and the careful reverence of a man holding something that could, apparently, incapacitate a horse. He backed out of the workroom. Aurelia watched him go. Despite everything, the confrontation, the anger, the 6 years sitting in her chest like a stone, she almost smiled. He reminds you of yourself, her wolf said. 19. Eager. Making tinctures from the wrong tree. I never made a tincture from the wrong tree. You set a man's arm with a broom handle and a belt. At 19. In a barn. That worked. So will he. Eventually. On the 6th day, the papers were on his desk. Not in his bed, not hidden under his pillow, not smuggled in by Jem. On his desk, across the room, where she told him they should be. Untouched since morning. She checked his wound. The stitches were holding beautifully. The infection was gone. The rib was setting clean. She could feel it through the tissue, the bone knitting in the correct alignment, the work of a healer who knew what she was doing. Pain level. 3. Honestly. 4. That's better. She rewrapped the bandage, her hands on his skin, routine now, the 4th time today, professional and precise, and still, underneath the professionalism, something that hummed at a frequency she couldn't turn off and had stopped trying to. You haven't touched your papers. You told me not to reach above my shoulder. The desk is at waist height. I'm being cautious. She looked at him. He looked back. His face was open in a way it hadn't been before the confrontation. Not raw, not stripped, but unlocked. Like a door left ajar on purpose. The sinew thread, she said. Jem ordered it. Jem doesn't know the northern suppliers. Jem doesn't know what wolf-grade sinew is. Jem still thinks cotton is acceptable for wolf sutures, which we are going to fix before I leave. Before you leave? When I leave. She packed her kit. The rib is healing well. 2 more days for the bone to set fully. Then I'll do a final assessment and clear you for normal activity. And then you go. That's the contract. Desmond nodded. If you go, I won't follow. I won't send riders. I won't send letters. I won't sit in this room and decide what you're thinking or what you need or what's best for you. You'll go, and I'll let you go, and that will be your choice. Aurelia's hands stilled on her bag. You mean that? I've been practicing. The ghost of something crossed his face, not a smile, not humor, but the specific dryness that lived underneath his king voice. the real register she hadn't heard in 7 years. I've been lying in this bed, following your instructions, and not reaching for my papers, and drinking things that taste like death. And I've been practicing what it feels like to let someone else decide what happens next. It's terrible. I'm terrible at it, but I'm practicing. Aurelia looked at him, really looked, for the first time without the clinical frame, without the healer's distance she'd been using like a shield. He was sitting up, cleared for sitting as of yesterday, his wound wrapped in clean bandages she'd changed herself, wearing a shirt she'd helped him into because the rib wouldn't let him raise his arms. He looked tired and honest and like a man who was trying very hard to do something he'd never done before and wasn't sure he was doing it right. I stocked the medical stores, she said. The full inventory, not just what you need now. Comfrey, willow bark, yarrow, bone set, the wolf-specific compounds your physician has never heard of. I've written Jem a manual, 12 pages. He'll need supervision, but he's trainable. You're training my staff. I'm fixing your infrastructure. Someone has to. She left. She did not say she was staying. She did not say she was going. She went to her workroom and she sat with the sinew thread in her hands and she thought about a man who had lied to save her life and then been too afraid of his own lie to undo it, and who was now lying in a bed following her instructions and drinking terrible medicine and not reaching for his papers, and who had ordered sinew thread from the Northern Territories because she'd mentioned it once, at 2 a.m, while her hands were on his wound. He's learning, her wolf said. I know. You've made 12 pages of instructions for a post you haven't been offered. In a keep you say you're leaving. I'm being thorough. You've been thorough since the day he rejected you. Thorough is what you do instead of feeling things. What are you actually feeling? Aurelia put down the thread. Clara found her at the workroom window the next morning. The girl appeared in the doorway, red hair, missing tooth, arm in the sling from the tree climbing incident Aurelia had treated 2 days ago. Clara climbed everything, trees, fences, the stable roof once, to Hal's visible aging. Are you leaving? Aurelia looked at her. Maybe. Poppy says you're not. Poppy should mind her own business. Poppy says you smell like staying. You've smelled like staying since the first day, but you also smell like being scared. Clara tipped her head, the unsettling focus of a child whose wolf was wide awake. Can you smell like both? Aurelia crouched down so she was level with Clara. The girl looked at her with frank, unguarded attention. No agenda, no subtext, just a 6-year-old and a wolf named Poppy who could smell things most adults spent their lives not saying. Yes, Aurelia said. You can smell like both. That sounds hard. It is. The king smells like both too. Poppy says he's been smelling like both for a really long time, since before you came. Aurelia's eyes burned. She blinked it back. She was not going to cry in front of a 6-year-old because a wolf named Poppy had described 7 years of mutual damage in 2 sentences. Thank you, Clara. Are you going to fix his smell? Aurelia almost laughed. Almost. I'm working on it. Clara nodded with the gravity of a person who understood that some things took time and was willing to wait. Aurelia went to him that evening. Not to check his wound, not to adjust his bandages, not with her medical kit or her healer's distance or the armor of competence she'd been wearing for a week like a second skin. She went to his study. The door was open, lamplight, the scratch of a pen. He was working, alone, at an hour when the rest of the keep was asleep. The council papers were on his desk where she'd told him they should be, and he was using them like a desk was meant to be used, not like a king defying his healer from a hospital bed. She stood in the doorway. He looked up, set the pen down. Not because she told him to, because she was there. Your rib is healed, she said. The bone has set cleanly. The wound is closing. Another week with the poultice and it'll scar well. I'm satisfied with the work. Thank you. I've stocked your medical stores for 6 months. Written Jem a comprehensive manual. Established protocols for wolf-specific injuries that your physician should have had 10 years ago. Your infirmary is functional. Your staff is trained. You don't need me. I know. I could leave tomorrow and you'd be fine. Yes. She stepped into the room. One step, then another. I'm not staying because you ordered the sinew thread. I'm not staying because you drank the tinctures. I'm not staying because Clara's wolf said I smell like staying, and she's apparently never wrong. Then why? Aurelia stopped in front of his desk. He was sitting, she was standing. For once, she was the one looking down at the king. Because you put the papers on the desk. Because you drank the medicine that tastes like death without complaining. Because you lay still for 12 hours when I told you to. Because for the first time since I've known you, you let someone else make decisions about your body and your health and your daily life, and you didn't fight it, and you didn't override it, and you didn't decide you knew better. She breathed. Because you're practicing. You said you were terrible at it, and you're right, you are. But you're doing it. And that's... Her voice cracked. Just a fracture. The first crack in Aurelia Moonblest's professional composure since she'd walked through the gate of Greymane Keep 7 days ago. That's what you should have done 7 years ago. Trusted me. Even though it was hard. Even though it was terrifying. Trusted me and let me help carry it. Desmond stood. Slowly, not because of the rib, which was healed, but because he was doing everything slowly around her now. Open hands, open face. Nothing sudden. I'm not forgiving you, she said. I want that clear. I understand why you sent me away, and I understand why you lied about the bond, and I am still angry about the 6 years of silence. That anger isn't going anywhere soon. I'm going to be angry while I'm staying. You're going to have an angry healer living in your West Wing, reorganizing your medicine cabinet and training your staff and telling you to drink things that taste like death. That's what this is. That's enough. It's not enough. It's a start. He was standing in front of her now, close. Not touching. He hadn't touched her since the storm, since she'd caught him falling and held him upright and felt his heart slam against her ribs. He stood close and he waited. I'm choosing to stay, she said. Not because you made it easy or romantic, or because you gave some grand speech. Because you drank the medicine. That's it. That's the whole reason. You drank terrible medicine because I told you to. And for the first time in 7 years, I believe you might actually be capable of trusting someone other than yourself. I trust you. Prove it. Every day. For a very long time. She put her hand on his chest, over his heart. She'd done this before. Checked his heart rate, monitored his pulse. Professional, clinical, routine. This time, she wasn't checking. She was just touching him. Choosing to touch him. His heart hammered under her palm. Your heart rate is elevated, she said. I'm aware. Are you in pain? No. His hands came up, slowly, framing her face the way she'd taught him to approach everything, patient, open, letting her come to him. I haven't been all right in 7 years, Aurelia. I know. Neither have I. And that's your fault. And mine. And the Ashton factions, and your father's. And it's going to take more than sinew thread and good behavior to fix. I know. But the sinew thread was a good start. She kissed him. Not recklessly. Not the way she would have at 24, blind and certain and drunk on a bond she didn't understand yet. This was the kiss of a woman who understood exactly what she was choosing, and what it had cost her the last time, and what it might cost her again, and was choosing it anyway because the alternative was another 7 years of fine and she was done being fine. His arms came around her. Carefully, not because of the rib, because of her. Because she'd told him to prove it every day, and he was starting now. She pulled back after a moment, looked at him. His eyes were gold, Not amber, not honey warm, wolf gold. Brack was right there. "Tell your wolf I said hello," she said. Brack, inside Desmond's chest, made a sound that was not translatable into human language but communicated, approximately. She spoke to us. She acknowledged our existence. This is the greatest moment of my entire life. I have waited 7 years. I have been patient beyond all reasonable. "He says hello back," Desmond said. "He's being loud." "He's always loud. I just got better at not showing it." Aurelia's wolf, quiet, sardonic, patient, stirred. For the first time in 7 years and 7 days, not to observe, not to catalogue, not to say fine. "Hello, Brack." Brack went completely, utterly, profoundly silent. Then, "She knows my name." "Your wolf is going to be a problem," Aurelia said. "He's always been a problem." Desmond's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Just ask the last wall that fell on me." She laughed. It surprised her, the sound of it, rusty and real and coming from somewhere she'd bricked over. His face when she laughed was something she was going to have to deal with later, because the way he looked at her, like he'd been living in a house with no windows and she'd just opened one, was more than she was prepared to process standing up. "Go to sleep," she said. "I'll check your wound in the morning." "You just said the wound is healed." "I'll check it anyway. Go to sleep, Desmond." She left. She walked to her quarters, the ones in the West Wing, near the workroom. The ones she'd chosen because they were close to the infirmary and far from his chambers, which had been the point. And she sat on her bed, and she pressed her hands to her face, and she didn't cry because Aurelia Moonblessed didn't cry, except that she did, just this once, quietly, in the dark. And her wolf sat with her and didn't say a word because some things didn't need words. The marking happened 9 days later. Not because the rib needed time, the rib was healed. Because Aurelia Moonblessed did not rush. She observed. She assessed. She watched him practice being trustworthy. Drinking the tinctures, she kept prescribing them even after they were medically unnecessary. He kept drinking them without complaint. Neither of them acknowledged this. Keeping the papers on his desk, sending Jem to her workroom with questions about wolf-specific healing that were too targeted to be Jem's own. She watched him let her reorganize his infirmary, rewrite his medical protocols, install a permanent workroom in the West Wing with her name on the door. She watched him not ask her to stay. He never asked her to stay. He stocked the workroom. He gave Jem to her as a permanent apprentice. He quietly, without announcement, without decree, without any public gesture that could be mistaken for a grand romantic action, redirected every wolf injury case in the territory to her infirmary instead of the court physician. When pack members arrived at her door with sprains and shifting disorders and the chronic aches of wolves who'd never been treated by someone who understood their physiology, she understood what he'd done. He hadn't given her a title. He hadn't made a speech. He'd given her patience. He'd given her work. He'd given her the thing she actually wanted, a reason to stay that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with who she was. "He's not learning," her wolf said on the 9th morning, watching Aurelia examine a teenager whose first shift had gone wrong. "He already learned. Now he's building." Aurelia looked across the infirmary at Desmond, who was standing in the doorway, not hovering, not finding excuses, just present, watching her work with the quiet attention of a man who had finally figured out that the most romantic thing he could do was get out of her way and let her be brilliant. She crossed the room. He straightened. The boy's shift locked halfway. His left shoulder is still partially canine. "It's a common first shift complication. I can fix it, but I'll need an extra pair of hands for the realignment." "I have hands." "I know you do. Come hold his shoulder." They worked together. Aurelia guided the shift back with her hands and her voice, the low, steady tone she used with wolves in distress. "You're all right. Your body knows what to do. Let it find the shape." And Desmond held the boy's shoulders steady with the particular stillness that only an alpha could bring, the grounding weight that told a young wolf's body, "You are pack, you are safe, be still." The shift completed. The boy gasped, shuddered, looked at his fully human shoulder, and burst into tears of relief. His mother, in the corridor, made a sound not unlike Brack at his most emotional. Aurelia looked at Desmond. His hands were still on the boy's shoulder. His eyes were gold. He was looking at her the way he'd looked at her in the storm, not with need or want or the desperation of a bond pulling taut, but with recognition. The quiet, devastating recognition of a man seeing the woman he loved do the thing she was made for, and knowing, finally, permanently, that the best thing he'd ever done was stop deciding what she needed and start trusting her to know it herself. "Clear the room," Aurelia said. Desmond cleared the room. The boy went to his mother. Jem, who had been hovering, vanished with the instinct of someone who had finally developed a sense of timing. Aurelia took Desmond's hand, the one that had held the boy's shoulder, the one that had held a sword and a pen and a crown and her face. She turned it over, pressed her lips to his palm. "I'm ready," she said. He understood. Not ready to stay, she'd already chosen that. Ready for the mark. Ready to let the bond complete, to let the thing she'd been told was a lie become the truest thing she'd ever felt. To trust it and him and herself all at once. The mark, his mouth at the curve of her neck, her hand in his hair, the bond sealing with a warmth that started in her sternum where the ache had lived for 7 years and spread outward until her whole body knew what her wolf had always known, was not dramatic. It was medical. It was precise. It was the careful, patient, hard-won work of two people who had been broken and had healed badly and were now finally being put back together by someone who knew what she was doing. "I am going to be unbearable about this." Aurelia's wolf. "Yes, you are. For the rest of our lives." Aurelia's wolf. "Yes, you are." Was that a smile? Did your wolf just— "Your wolf is talking again," Aurelia said against his neck. "He's never going to stop." "I know. I'm prescribing a tincture for it. Does the tincture taste terrible?" "They all taste terrible, Desmond." 3 months later. Aurelia Moonblessed had not moved into the castle. She had moved the castle's medical infrastructure into her wing, which was, Hal pointed out, functionally the same thing. Her infirmary treated an average of 6 patients a day. Jem had graduated from apprentice to assistant and could now stitch a wolf wound with the correct thread. Not cotton. Never cotton. I will end you, Jem. Which Aurelia considered her single greatest professional achievement. The court physician had been retrained, gently, through a series of increasingly pointed memos that Aurelia posted on the infirmary door alongside her standing notice. Healer's hours, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Emergencies, anytime. Royal complaints about medicine taste, never. Desmond's things had migrated to her quarters with the inevitable patience of a tide. Cloak, books, council papers, on the desk, always on the desk, where she'd told him they belonged. "You don't live here," she told him on a Tuesday. "I left my boots here." "You left 12 pairs of boots here." "I have a lot of boots." "You have a lot of excuses. You have a perfectly good king's chamber on the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor is too far from the infirmary." "You don't need the infirmary. You're healed." "I might get injured again. The east wall is still being rebuilt. Anything could happen." Desmond. "I drink my tincture faster when you're in the room." She looked at him, at the king who had learned to trust her with his body, and then his heart, and then his kingdom's medical system, in that order. At the man who drank terrible medicine every morning without complaint because she'd told him to, and because the act of doing what she said had become, somewhere in the last 3 months, not obedience, but intimacy. At the person whose wolf talked constantly, and whose hands were steady, and whose scars she knew by touch in the dark. "You're impossible," she said. "You like impossible. You built a career around impossible." At 3 in the morning, Clara showed up at the infirmary with a nosebleed and an expression of calm self-possession that suggested she'd acquired the nosebleed deliberately in order to visit. "It's not bleeding very much," Clara said, holding a cloth to her face. Then why are you in my infirmary at 3 in the morning? Poppy wanted to check something. What did Poppy want to check? Clara removed the cloth. The nosebleed had already stopped. She looked at Aurelia with the clear-eyed certainty of a child whose wolf had never been wrong about anything. Poppy says you don't smell like being scared anymore. Aurelia looked at Clara, at the red hair, at the gap where a new tooth was finally coming in. Tell Poppy she's right. She knows. Clara hopped off the table. She also says Brack is very loud. All the wolves can hear him. He's been loud since the marking. It's a lot. I'm aware. Poppy says it's nice though. Loud but nice. Clara considered. Like you. She patted out. Aurelia stood in the infirmary at 3 in the morning, and her wolf, warm, present, no longer sardonic, no longer evading, no longer patient because the thing she'd been waiting for had arrived, said, "Home." "Home," Aurelia said, and meant it.